While behind us is the ever-changing, ever-growing Shipyards District here in Lonsdale Quay in North Vancouver. But we want to take a moment to welcome a brand new partner to our city tonight, the Richmond Sentinel.
You can check out local news, international news, you can check out entertainment and human interest stories. The Richmond Sentinel is available in print and online. They're our new partner. They're going to be sponsoring some of the segments we do in each episode, including this one we're going to look at right now as we return to showcase once again in our ongoing series, the Whistler Film Festival. Let's head back up there and interview a very cool actor. Well, we're continuing our journey through the Whistler Film Festival, joined now by a very familiar face to people here in Canada, of course everywhere else. Great to have actor Eric McCormack here. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Hey, everybody. Eric, lots to cover, long, successful career. Let's take a minute to go back to the beginning. From Ryerson, you went to the Stratford Shakespeare Festival. Tell us what it was like as a young actor to experience that.
Well, growing up, it was all about television, and then when I started in theater in high school, everything changed, and suddenly by the time I got to Ryerson, it was all about Shakespeare. It was all about, I've got to get to Stratford. And I did. I actually left Ryerson about 2 months early because I got an apprenticeship. And I mean, those 5 years really are my college years, my formative years as a grown-up. As an actor, I had no lines the first year because you're
carrying the spear.
Carrying the spear. And being under people like Douglas Campbell and young Colin Feore and Shauna McKenna, and yet the first day of rehearsal was not for King Lear or Twelfth Night, which I would do a few weeks later. It was for a production of Measure for Measure that was directed by a very controversial director out of England named Michael Bogdanov. And he decided he was setting the whole thing in modern day, and that the scenes that take place in the brothel would in fact be like a punk club, and everyone was going to be transvestites and hookers. This is Stratford, and you can look this picture up. Myself and the other young apprentice were dressed Frankenfurter-like in this full leather, and we sang. I mean, it was incredible. We had to do all our own rock and roll makeup. Some of the other actors at the festival were not delighted that this was taking, but this was the show that got all the attention that season. Yeah. Someone, I think the Montreal paper thought it was brilliant, the Toronto paper hated it, I can't remember, but it got just a lot of talk, and it was the greatest way to start one's Shakespeare career. And then also that year, it was John Hirsch's last year
you were there when he was there.
And I was there for his last year, and he decided to blow it out and took Lear and Twelfth Night on tour of the United States for 3 months. So there I am, I'm 21, making tour money, just carrying a spear and understudying Colum in Twelfth Night, and we went to Washington and Seattle and Los Angeles. We played, and Florida for 5 weeks. That was bizarre. No one in Florida wants to see Shakespeare. They think they do.
In a dinner theater.
They think they do. They go to this. They're all 100 years old, and every night somebody would shout out, "I can't speak louder." One night somebody yelled out, "Speak English!" And Teddy Atienza was playing Fester, and he said, "This is English, you bastard." I probably shouldn't swear anymore.
We can believe that.
But that was an amazing thing. And then John Neville came in, the great John Neville, God rest him, and who was a mentor to so many of us. So many young people just looked up to, and he brought me along very slowly. I got a few lines in the third season. I had a couple of good parts, and by the fifth season, I did a Three Sisters that he directed, and I have such great memories of that. So it was there's those 5 years, and then in the winters in between, I would play in Edmonton, in Winnipeg, in New Brunswick. So I had 10 straight years of theater that I would never trade.
And as someone who grew up in Toronto, how revered Ryerson was, I'm sure there were people going, "You're leaving that school early?" I mean, it worked out.
It worked out. I mean, that's, and everybody in my class auditioned for Hirsch in December of, well, I guess it would have been 84. With the same hopes. They might have lost more, but.
You certainly put your time in a lot of shows. Of course, you find yourself in the late 90s being introduced to the character of Will Will and Grace. What did you see in this character? I mean, likable is what I was saying, but give us your thoughts on your first impressions of Will when you sat down and were hired to do this show, which went on to become a landmark show for sure.
Thank you. Well, I mean, the setup for it is that sort of time in between leaving Toronto, getting to Vancouver, and Vancouver in '92. I fell in love with the city, but I also worked in television a lot. A lot of it was American television, not always great.
Yeah.
A lot of guest stars on crappy shows, but I was getting a resume, and then I did Lonesome Dove here in Canada, which was Calgary for 2 years, and a Western. So I was building this television resume, and all the time through the '90s, I'm watching Seinfeld, and I'm watching Friends, and I'm watching Mad About You, and I'm thinking, that's really what I want. I really want a must-see TV, NBC comedy, and every year I'd audition, and there were pilots, and there were this and that. I auditioned for Friends.
Did you really?
Yes, for Schwimmer's
Wow.
role. I actually had to call back. I thought I was close. And then years later, when Jimmy Burrows, who directed all of Will and Grace, I said, Jimmy, I was actually pretty close on Friends.
Yeah.
And he said, honey, you were wasting your time. They wrote the part for Schwimmer. All right. But so by the time '97 came along, that's what I really wanted. It was a great sitcom. I ended up doing a pilot for a not great sitcom, the Jenny McCarthy Show. And
Jenny McCarthy.
she had her own show for a season, and I was to play her kind of boss. I was supposed to be an actor, and she was my assistant. And we did the pilot in the spring of '97. And I knew for sure it was a guaranteed year on the air. I knew it wasn't great, but at least I had work. And then, but 3 weeks later, I was fired. I was summarily let go as I was shooting something else in Toronto.
Were you too good of an actor, or was it?
That's interesting.
Your words, not mine. But it was something.
Nothing against Jenny, but
they cut the part. They wanted to go a different way with it.
Okay.
So, and this was an NBC show. So 7 months later, we're shooting the Will and Grace pilot, and Deborah and I were sitting on the couch, looking at each other, like, crap, did that just happen? Like, we just knew it was one of those shows. And Warren Littlefield, who ran the network, walked up and looked at me and said, aren't you glad I fired you?
Well, you do drama, comedy, but you also have been in the iconic musical, Music Man, so Broadway. Tell us the difference between doing episodic TV and doing your stage.
Well, I mean, there's episodic television that is single camera. Will and Grace and any sitcom like that has an audience, so it's a real hybrid of my stage experience and the film experience that I was learning, and I love it. I mean, I've always said there's nothing better than being on a great sitcom, and there's nothing worse than being on a mediocre sitcom. You know, it's a great form, but only if the writing is crackerjack and the audience is on board. But I'd put the theater away for a little while, and this is 20 years ago this year, and it was, I guess, at the end of my third season of Will and Grace, I think, and I got an offer to take over the role of the Cat in the Hat in Seussical the musical, which was playing. And the idea that I could just get an offer to be on Broadway, even for a brief period of time in my hiatus, and so they're going to fly my wife and I there and see the show. And this was entirely my own doing. I happened to read in Variety that the guy who'd been playing Harold Hill in The Music Man, Craig Bierko, was leaving the show. This was a Tony-nominated show that had opened last year. And I just said, can I also see The Music Man when I'm there? And they said, same producers. And they said, yeah, sure, of course. And afterwards, Janet and I went for a drink, and I just said, I'm going to that's the one I want. And so I turned the Seussical down, and they said, well, you got to audition for Susan Stroman, who directed it. I said, great. And I came back 3 weeks later and did Trouble, and did a scene with Rebecca Luker, God rest her, and that's how The Music Man came about. And it was such an incredible production. I mean, 50 cast members, and a lot of them kids, like real kids, not adults playing kids. It was such a family. And to be able to sort of parachute into that show for 4 months and live that was heaven.
Let's, before we let you go, let's talk a bit about your character, Hank. in the movie Drinkwater. We were talking on the red carpet last night about this film, and I was saying to you, I really love it when actors from this country who had achieved international success come home. I want to see more of that, and you've done that with this film. Tell our viewers that's what you're up here in Whistler for, and not to get a big award, which is great, but tell us about Hank.
I just want to say it's been described as the most Canadian of all films made.
It is, and without lots of beaver or maple syrup jokes. It's Canadian because it's in Canada. It's unapologetically small town Canada. If Penticton is small town, but it's also not cliched. There's the poor side of town. There's the rich side of town. There's of course hockey. Hank's very into hockey. But Hank, what I loved about Hank is that he's a bit of a scoundrel. As I said to you last night, I don't think of him as a deadbeat dad, but he's definitely a deadbeat. He's a deadbeat. He's been ripping off the government for years by pretending to still be injured from some accident that never happened at the mill. He's just a big liar.
He's in great shape.
He's behind closed doors at home. He's in the best shape of all, and he's on a spin bike and everything. But when he leaves the house, he's on a scooter and with the thing, which I love. My mother-in-law has been in a scooter for about 10 years and bashing into things. And so I was sort of partly my mother-in-law in that movie, and partly my wife's Uncle Donnie. Somebody said, "What's the impetus behind the character?" I said, "It's my wife's Uncle Donnie with Burton Cummings' mustache."
Yes, you cannot deny that.
That is Canadian.
That is Canadian.
Hey, look for Drinkwater coming in 2022. Eric, thank you for taking the time to talk with us.
Could talk all day.
Yeah,
Appreciate you joining us. Cheers.
Nice to be here. Thanks.
This segment was sponsored by the Richmond Sentinel, providing news, entertainment, and human interest stories in print and online.